Most of Week 1 is in the books, and it started back on Thursday with the game between the Ravens and Chiefs. This was a highly anticipated game as it was an AFC Championship game rematch, and the game absolutely lived up to the hype. The Chiefs would go on to win with a score of 27-20, and I know it was a tough loss for the Ravens, but my big takeaway was that they're going to be fine. They had a lot of mental miscues, which is going to happen at the beginning of each season, and they were a foot away from going for 2 and potentially winning the game in regulation. I think the offensive line will get better with time, and I also think Derrick Henry and Lamar will get better as the season goes on. Tough loss, but the Ravens will be fine. As for Kansas City, I thought the offense looked pretty good against a great defense, and Xavier Worthy, welcome to the NFL. Rashee Rice and Xavier played well, and while it wasn't a big game for Isaiah Pacheco or Travis Kelce, being able to actually trust other players in the offense, unlike a lot of last year, is going to be huge for Kansas City's quest to three-peat. I also thought Leo Chanel played a great game, and I thought he was all over the field. To Brazil to discuss Eagles-Packers, and the Eagles had about as nightmare of a start as they could have imagined. They had 2 turnovers on their first 2 possessions, and Jalen threw not just 1, but 2 very ugly interceptions in this game. But as they say, a win is a win. I would imagine we all feel the same about the turf in this game, and I'll leave it at that. But the receiving duo of A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith looked incredible as they went on to combine for over 200 yards. Saquon Barkley had quite the Eagles debut too, and for the first time in his career, he legitimately has a supporting cast around him, and the sky is the limit. Zach Bond also played one of the best games of his career, and he played a big part in the Eagles' win. Now, for the Packers, I think we are all glad Jordan Love is only expected to miss 3 to 6 weeks, because when that injury happened, I'm sure we all feared the worst, and I know I did. Jaden Reed had a great game, and I think he will go for well over 1,000 yards this year, and my only question about Jordan Love from when he played, and I don't know how much of this can be attributed to the field conditions, but he threw a lot off of his back foot in this game, and he already does that to begin with, but it seemed like it was excessive in this game. I don't know if it was to feel more comfortable in these conditions, but that will be something to monitor when he comes back. To be clear, I think he is a great player, and I think the Packers' playoff chances are very much alive. They're not done after a Week 1 loss and losing their quarterbacks for a few weeks early in the year. This roster is far too talented. On to Sunday, we go to discuss Cardinals-Bills. This was a very frustrating game for the Cardinals as they were up 17-3 at a point and everything was looking good. There was a point where people were questioning how good or bad the Bills would be this year. Arizona had 3 10-plus play drives in the first half and were completely in control. The defense and the offensive play calling absolutely let them down in the second half, and it's incredibly frustrating to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. number 4 overall, and for him to have 1 catch in his NFL debut. And even for that matter, it was disappointing to see Kyler Murray throw for just 161 yards. I will be looking at Drew Petzing over the next few weeks and see how he rebounds after this, because it was a tale of 2 entirely different halves. Their lone touchdown in the second half came on a kick return. For Buffalo, an ugly win is still a win. Josh Allen had 4 total touchdowns and 9 different players caught a pass in Week 1, and this is how I expect Buffalo's passing game to go in 2024, by committee. Greg Rousseau also had a tremendous game, and this could be the start of a breakout year for him. I am really looking forward to Thursday night when this team travels to Miami. And to Miami we go to discuss Jags Dolphins. Tyreek Hill had an incident before the game, and him and teammate Jalen Waddle each had over 100 yards in a 20-17 win. Admittedly, I was disappointed with how the Dolphins' ground game played in Week 1, and credit to the Jags' defense, but I am absolutely looking forward to seeing how Mike McDaniel utilizes the backfield in Week 2 and beyond. I know I've doubted them before, and credit to the Dolphins for overcoming a second-half deficit, as they were down 17-7 at half, and also credit where it's due for shutting out the Jags in the second half. The Dolphins played a not great first half of football and still won, and a win, especially in the AFC, is huge, and shout out to Javon Holland. Now, for the Jags, I have concerns with this team moving forward, but Brian Thomas Jr. is not one of them. As simple as this is, get him the football in any way possible. I like him a lot. Now, the Jags did not lose this game because of the Travis Etienne fumble. Obviously, that didn't help, but losing the turnover battle and being outgained by 130 yards on the road is a losing recipe. Stop me if you've heard this before, but Trevor Lawrence receivers dropped multiple passes. I'm not saying the Jags are done in week 1, and I don't want that to be the takeaway, but thinking out loud, what is the ceiling for this team? We're on to Cincinnati to discuss Pat's Bengals, and a big credit to New England for going into the jungle and winning. My concerns with the Pats heading into the season was never the defense, it was always the offensive line. But credit to Ramondre Stevenson in the run game for rushing for 170 yards in this game and playing a tremendous part in securing the improbable victory. The Pats had countless bad turnovers in 2023, and it was nice to see a game without them to start the year. And the reality is, if the Patriots play turnover-free football with how good their defense is, they're going to be in a lot of games. Kyle Duggar had one of the best plays you'll see all year, and enough credit cannot be given to this defense for holding Cincy to just 224 yards of offense. For the Bengals, there's no way to sugarcoat this. It's an ugly loss. Internally, they think they are a Super Bowl caliber team, and I know the Bengals struggle at the beginning of every year, but should we just excuse this loss and say, meh, they'll be fine? It was a bad loss, and Cincy's 1-10 throughout the first 2 weeks of a season during the Zach Taylor era. It wasn't a pretty week leading into this game for Cincy, and it showed when the game was played. To Atlanta we go to discuss Steelers-Falcons. If you don't like this type of game as a Steelers fan, then you don't like the nasty, gritty Pittsburgh Steeler football. The Steelers won with a score of 18-10 and had 0 touchdowns. And honestly, Justin Fields didn't look bad in this game. And if I have one big takeaway from this game that may be a hot take, it's that I think George Pickens is a legitimate wide receiver 1, and if they can simply get him the football, then he can go for over 1,400 yards this year, if not more. He's an animal, and Steelers fans of course know this too, but the impact of TJ Watt on every single play is downright insane. For Atlanta, this was an awful start to the Kirk Cousins era. 155 yards, 1 passing touchdown, and 2 interceptions is how the Kirk era started after signing him to a 4-year, $180 million contract. This was all while putting up just 10 points. Kyle Pitts and Drake London combined for 5 receptions for 41 yards, and I know Pitts had a touchdown, but that's not what the Falcons envisioned when they made this signing. Atlanta's next 2 games are at Philly and home against Kansas City, and I have a lot of questions about this team moving forward. To Chicago we go to discuss Titans-Bears and the first win in the Caleb Williams era. This was anything but a smooth win for Chicago, and to be honest, the win smoothed over a lot of things. Caleb did not play well in his NFL debut, and he finished the game just 14 of 29 for 93 yards. The Bears had just 148 yards of offense, and they were incredibly lucky to escape this game with a win. The big thing moving forward for the Bears offense was Caleb didn't lose them the game. The Titans are going to be a pain to play this year, and this game showed that. Matt Eberflus's defense played their tails off, and they're a big reason for this win. Holding a team to just 244 yards of offense and 17 points, while forcing 3 turnovers, should in theory result in a win every single time. For Tennessee, let's call it what it is. This is an awful loss. This team was up 17-0 and gave up 24 unanswered points to a team that did not score an offensive touchdown. There's no sugarcoating how this team or fan base should feel. Will Levis had one of the worst interceptions you'll ever see, and my biggest question for Tennessee moving forward is, what's next? How do you respond to a game you clearly had no business losing, yet blew a 17-point lead to a team that did not have an offensive touchdown? To New Orleans to discuss Saints-Panthers, and the Saints part is easy. They kicked their rear ends, period. And a big credit where it's due to somebody I've doubted a lot, and that's to Derek Carr. Derek Carr was efficient in this game and played at a high level. He elevated his teammates in week 1, and another big credit to the Saints ground game, who finished 31st in yards per carry last year. They had no trouble running the football in this game, and it looked like a varsity versus JV matchup. This is a game where Saints fans can enjoy listening to every piece of content they want, because they absolutely demolished the Panthers. Now for Carolina, guys, this is ugly. There's no way to justify a 47-10 loss. There's no way to justify your former number 1 overall pick going 13 of 30 with 2 interceptions in a game you lose by 37 points. I thought the Panthers would be an improved team throughout the 24 season, starting with this game. And they can be, as it's only 1 game, but guys, what the hell? A 37-point road loss to start the Dave Canales era is a joke. I'm not calling for him to be fired after 1 game, to be clear, but I simply ask this team and this franchise, are you kidding me? This is what we got in week 1? Are you serious? From one 2023 first-round quarterback to 2 others, we go to discuss Texans-Colts. This was a fun game to watch, and I sincerely hope we have this rivalry for not just a few years, but for well over a decade. There were times in 2023 where it was a lot of, hey CJ, you want to bail out the injured offensive line and poor run game and keep us in the game? But this game was nothing close to that. The Texans ran for over 200 yards as a team and played a really great game offensively. They had over 400 yards of offense, which was not something a lot of teams did in week 1, and beat a very tough Indy team. Shout out to Diggs for 2 touchdowns in his Texans debut, as well as Nico Collins for the insane catch at the end of the game. For Indy, they lost the time of possession battle 40-20 and gave up over 200 rushing yards as a defense. In a lot of ways, it was a miracle they only lost this game by 2 points. The splash plays were there for Indy's offense, and I thought Anthony Richardson did enough to get the win given the circumstances. He only had 17 starts since high school before this game, and I think with time, he will be fine. The bottom line for Indy in weeks 2 and beyond is their defense has to be better, period. To the Big Apple we go to discuss Vikings-Giants. For Minnesota, it's simple. They looked great. Sam Darnold started the day 12 of 12 and played a really good game. His interception was on a ball where his arm was hit, and as you can tell, it did not affect the outcome of the game. Aaron Jones is a substantial upgrade from what this ground game had in 2023, and the Vikings played pretty well. Their defense is electric, and I know the obvious thing is to dunk on Daniel Jones, and while Daniel did not play well in this game, I think it was a combination of a great defense and a bad Giants offense. Big credit to Andrew Van Ginkel, who essentially secured the win. Now, for the Giants, if I'm going to overreact about any team in this video, it's with the Giants. This is a bad football team. The quarterback was awful, the offensive line wasn't great as DJ was sacked 5 times, and it also seemed like Minnesota was getting home whenever they wanted. To make matters worse, this was a fully healthy team. Daniel Jones has now thrown 2 touchdowns to 8 interceptions since signing the $160 million contract, and this was an ugly, ugly game. And I don't know what the solution is. Does anybody envision this team going to Philly or Dallas and beating them when it matters? I don't, and I think the Giants have a very long season ahead of them. Out to LA to discuss Raiders-Chargers, and what a win for the Chargers to start the Jim Harbaugh era. For J.K. Dobbins fans, this game felt vindicating after a couple of long years of injury and him going through a ton of adversity. Now, in a lot of ways, this was an anti-Chargers game based on how the Chargers usually play. They'll get into, for lack of better wording, just very Charger games, and I think this game showed a big difference between Brandon Staley and Jim Harbaugh, and the culture Jim is creating and will continue to create over the next few years. It was also good to see the sneaky athletic lad McConkey get his first career touchdown, and I don't say this often, but a rare stress-free second half for the Chargers in a win. For the Raiders, the play that summarizes this game was the 4th and 1 punt with 7 minutes to play on the Chargers' 43-yard line. That decision summarizes a lot of my concerns with the Raiders entering the year. That showed in week 1. 10 points will not cut it, and as you can see by the decision from the team's head coach, he did not trust the offense when it mattered. And my concern with the Raiders, not just in this game but for the 2024 season, was if they give up 20 points, which isn't a whole lot, how many games are they going to win with Gardner or AOC as their quarterback? And for now, they're 0-1 in those games. Up by 5 to Seattle we go to discuss Broncos-Seahawks. I know the raw stat line for Bo Nix doesn't look good, but he had a lot of things going against him and will continue to throughout his rookie year. The receivers he's throwing to are not a good unit, and I still don't understand the decision to release Tim Patrick, but when you factor in a great defensive mind in Mike McDonald and an incredibly tough place to play in Seattle, I thought Bo played alright. Not great, but alright. Rookies are rookies, and that's what has to be remembered. And what has to be remembered for Denver was, from a financial standpoint this year, they were always going to be fighting an uphill battle, and it could have been a lot worse. For Seattle, it was great to see Kenneth Walker bounce back and for him to have a great start to the year. Their defense also held the Broncos to 231 yards of total offense and forced multiple turnovers. Seattle also allowed 2 safeties as an offense, and no, that's not made up, and they gave the Broncos the ball in the red zone to start a drive once, and from a field position standpoint, did not help their defense out at all. This was a great start to the defensive era under head coach Mike McDonald, and they will be a very fun unit to watch all year long. All the way down to Tampa to discuss Commanders-Bucks. Baker Mayfield played a great game and the Bucks offense looked great, especially future Hall of Famer Mike Evans. It was a tremendous start to the year for a team that went to the divisional round last year, and this was one of the best games the Bucks have played in a while, in the regular season that is, because they of course had a great game against Philly last year in the playoffs. But they didn't mess around, they beat an inferior team, their offensive line looked good, which includes 2024 first-round pick Graham Barton, and another rookie Bucky Irving looked great as a running back too. You really couldn't have drawn up a better game for Tampa aside from injuries at corner. They looked like a great football team. For Washington, I liked the debut of Jaden Daniels. I thought he played well considering the circumstances, and I thought he looked good in the process, and hell, the best rookie quarterback of the day. He's electric with the football in his hands and looked better as the game went on. What has to be remembered with the 2024 Commanders is they're going to be in for a couple of year rebuild. Do not expect them to win 9 games this year. This game, and ensuing games for that matter, will show that. But Jaden looked good, and that's what matters. To Cleveland to discuss Cowboys-Browns. It was announced Dak Prescott agreed to a contract extension before the game, and the Cowboys would go on to win by 16 points, although it was not as close as the score suggests. In fact, it might be the Cowboys' year, and all jokes aside, the Cowboys' defense was dominant. They sacked Deshaun Watson 6 times, they intercepted him twice, and this defense absolutely suffocated them. It was 20-3 at half, but it might as well have been over. The Cowboys offense didn't really need to do much aside from not turn the ball over and put their defense in a position to lose. Cleveland's defense is also really good, so credit where it's due, but Mike Zimmer's defense was the star of the show, and I think there's a good chance Eric Kendricks is the defensive player of the week. For Cleveland, guys, this is concerning. It's as concerning as it gets. They gave Deshaun Watson a $230 million contract, and sure, you can make the excuse he had multiple offensive linemen out in this game, and even Nick Chubb for that matter too, but does it matter? Do any Browns fans walk away from this game and think, man, if we're healthy, Deshaun is going to be able to read the field better and make better decisions and not be a complete net negative to this franchise? I doubt it. This is a bad situation because there's no easy way out. And my simple question for the Browns and their fan base when it comes hell or high water, do you actually think you're going into Kansas City or Baltimore or Houston or Buffalo and winning with the season on the line? This was a disastrous week 1 for Cleveland. I hope you enjoyed the week 1 recap. Please like and subscribe if you did, as only about 34% of people watching are subscribed and helps the channel tremendously. This is going to be a very fun season ahead. Love you guys.